and welcome to Pathways with Penny. My name is Penny Hanson, and I am your guide on this journey of exploring complementary and alternative approaches to our traditional Western model of medicine. One of the areas that has been of interest to me, and I think is of rising interest to people across the country, is that of returning to a more natural source for the supplements and vitamins and so forth that we put into our bodies. And so today I have invited someone who is actually not located not too far away from Watertown. He's from Oconomowoc. David Bock is an acupuncturist and also offers herbal medicine. And I've asked him to come and share some of his awarenesses of the differences between using herbal medicine as an approach to well-being as opposed to using the prescribed chemical medications that are usually offered to us through our traditional medical system. So, David, welcome.
Thank you, Penny.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. My background is in traditional Chinese medicine, and that's a very important part of this, is that any tool and herbs and other modalities are just tools. You know, what is really important is understanding how and why not to use them under various circumstances. And so as a medical practitioner, it's my job to determine what do patients need and what is the best way of helping them, whether that be with acupuncture or herbs or a lot of times just simple changes in lifestyle things in the way of foods or types of exercises and other things like that. So it's a very fascinating area of practice and very powerful in many ways. Like you said, I do a lot in the way of herbal medicines. That is one of my big things, and many of my patients do consider me more of a primary care provider, coming to me from everything from colds and flus and aches and sprains through more complex things of internal medicine, reproductive endocrinology, and also things that Western medicine has a hard time with, such as antibiotic-resistant infections and stuff like that. So,
interesting. Reproductive endocrinology. Could you expand on that?
Yes, I was the first person in the state of Wisconsin to get national board certification in the study and use of Chinese medicine for infertility work. Basically, there was a decision that the world of IVF and infertility work was growing, and that there was a tremendous place for traditional Chinese medicine in that world, but we don't want to step on the toes of the doctors who are doing very delicate work and quite often with an awful lot of money involved. And so I had very specific training and continue to train in working with couples who are trying to conceive and get pregnant. And there's a lot of things that traditional Chinese medicine can do in the way of herbs and stuff like that, in the way of rearranging a woman's menstrual cycle so that she can get pregnant, helping men, develop better sperm and stuff like that. A lot of really wonderful research backing a lot of that stuff up, and there's a lot of top reproductive endocrinologists around the country who are working with practitioners like myself to basically help women and couples get an edge on getting pregnant. So.
Now, you mentioned that as someone who uses herbal approaches to addressing situations that are going on with an individual. How is the assessment that you do different from what a medical doctor would do in addressing a particular imbalance?
The situation is, a couple of definitions. One, I come from a very specific medical system. So similar to a doctor, I'm going to ask a lot of questions and evaluate the symptoms and specifics of a patient. And that is as complex, if not more complex, than Western biomedical medicine. And it provides a roadmap of understanding what is going on with a patient within that context. The joke that I give is, you bring me 10 people with the same medical condition, I'm going to give you 10 different answers. And the reason is because traditional medicines, like traditional Chinese medicine, don't treat medical conditions, they treat the patient. We look at it from the other direction of, this patient is struggling with a problem, how is that patient's body dealing with that problem, and what do the symptoms tell us in the way of what type of help does that patient need to overcome their problem. So that becomes a much more intricate way of looking at things, and it gets away from the whole supplement marketing concept that many people are familiar with, where the idea is, oh, this is good for you. It's more of a matter of, no, this is a specific herbal medicine that is going to cause these changes or help your body to shift in a particular way. And we're going to adjust that as your body changes and adapt it to keep your body moving in a certain way, in a strategy to get you to some place of better health. As opposed to, oh, this is just good and we're just going to sell various things. That's more of a supplement concept as opposed to traditional medicine, which is much more of, there's a medical reason and need, and also reason not to use some of the things that I have. Much more of a specific that way. As I had mentioned earlier, one of my favorites is that it's a way of looking at that your house has a problem, therefore you need a hammer, is an illogical statement. You know, many people go by that. They say, oh, I have this problem, therefore I need this tool. The tool is good, there's nothing wrong with the hammer, but if we haven't determined why and how to use that tool to actually solve the problem, then that can be just as destructive as anything else. And so the whole concept of traditional Chinese medicine is to really understand what's going on with the patient and try and move them forward into what is their proper way of functioning. Everybody is different, and what is proper and balanced and healthy for one person is not for somebody else. The question is, what is their body capable of, and can we help them get there?
Right. So could you give us an example of someone comes to you with, say they've got a cold, okay? So how would you go about assessing that person and determining what they might need?
The common cold is a good example, because our language gets a little weird here because we talk about it as the common cold. What we're dealing with is a viral infection, and sometimes not. Sometimes bacterial infection, sometimes it's more of an allergy type situation. But a patient obviously has something going on more acute. You look at what are the signs and symptoms. From a simplistic standpoint, most colds and flus, and it gets more complicated than this, but most colds and flus can be divvied up into two categories that most people recognize. Your system goes to the runny, drippy, sneezy, watery eyes, dry, scratchy throat kind of situation. And that can be from a virus, that can also just be from allergies. You can get the same response. So from a traditional herbal point of view, we would look at that as what we call a wind-cold situation. In other words, the body is responding in ways that are cold and dynamic. You have the runny, clear, watery mucus. Usually there's some coldness to that, sometimes some cold, tight headache kind of situation. Things that in some way or another we associate, or historically were kind of just as a shorthand, were lumped into cold dynamics within the body. The body is functioning cold. The answer, of course, then is how do we help the body get past that, in which case we use various herbs that are very warming in nature and or dispersing and clear that out of the system. So, a simple example would be more garlic and cayenne peppers and various hot herbs and stuff like that that warm the system, and those would be appropriate for that type of situation. And there's other traditional Chinese herbs that do very similar types of things. The other type of situation that happens for many people is more of they've got a fever. They got a swollen, hot, sore throat, difficult to swallow, yellow nasal mucus, maybe some upset stomach or something like that. That's a very different type of cold, and yet we tend to lump that into the same type of
Yes,
thing
we
as a viral infection.
Mm-hmm.
But as hopefully as obvious is that's got to be treated differently. The body is responding differently and needs different type of help, in which case we would use herbs and other things that would cool and disperse that out of the system and help the body to recover and get over that cold, which we would call a wind heat, much more quickly. Many of the herbs that would be used in that type of situation are unfamiliar to people. Mint would be one of them, falls into that basic category. Not always the strongest, but it falls into that category. Echinacea also falls into that category as well, which is another good example. Echinacea comes from more of the European systems of herbs, and a lot of that information has been lost. And so in a situation like this, echinacea would be appropriate for a hot fever type, hot sore throat kind of situation. Mm-hmm. But it's also a very dispersing herb. It clears energy out of the body to help clear that situation. And so you wouldn't want to use it long time. And that's where people make quite often a mistake with the tool. They're misusing the tool. They say, oh, well, I'm using echinacea to build up my immunity. No, yes. It's not for building up your immunity. It's for venting the system out and helping you recover. And if you would use it all the time, it would actually cause harm, because what you're doing is you're continually venting the system and draining your energy. While that is appropriate at those particular times when you have a high fever, it is not appropriate when you're just doing fine.
Right.
And so that's the type of situation. We have to determine what does the patient need at that particular moment, and also have a strategy for how do we get the patient off of those herbs, those medicines, as appropriate. And for something like a cold, I'm going to prescribe something for 2-3 days tops. Whereas, there's other things where I would prescribe things, and we may keep a patient on a particular herbal formula for years on end, but there's a specific reason why we're doing that.
Okay, So what I'm hearing you say is that you're not necessarily recommending that someone drink echinacea tea if they have a cold.
No,
because that may not be.
Especially if they have an actual cold as I defined, it would make matters worse.
Okay.
And also, if there isn't any ongoing problem of fever or heat or something like that, or an infection, the echinacea is again going to make matters worse. You can get away with that for a certain amount of time, and people quite often do, but it does wear on the system, and it's not appropriate. It's not the appropriate use of the tool.
Yeah.
This particular formula, this is the raw herbal formula. I also have this in pill form, but this is a long-term use formula for people who are very low on energy, in strengthening and helping bodily functions and stuff like that to give somebody the strength to do what they need to do. The interesting thing with this type of formula is that it's very specific. There are other types of formulas. I think the next one that you've got there, which is just general, is a similar strengthening formula, but the dynamics are entirely different. This one does very little in the way of actually adding energy to the body, and actually is more focused on managing how the body is functioning. Many people who claim that I have low energy, I want more energy and stuff like that, their problem isn't that they don't have enough energy in their system. The problem is that their management system isn't regulating and moving the energy around and providing it the way they need it. Change that, and then they do a lot better. And likewise, somebody who is just managing their energy poorly, if that person is using herbs that are generally used or marketed for boosting energy, those things would just make things worse. It's kind of like if you handed a bad management system in a company a lot of extra capital and a lot of extra stuff, they're still going to mismanage it.
Yes, it's still not going to.
You haven't solved the problem.
Right.
And so it's always a matter of understanding how do you solve that problem and help that person function better. So.
Now, I haven't spent much time with herbs, but I'm not recognizing any of what is being shown on this screen.
Which is
here.
probably good. One of the things that is common in the marketing of supplements and one of the misuses of herbs is going with things that are popular.
Yes.
And
yes.
so there are a lot of herbal supplements and stuff like that that I feel inappropriately mix herbs and vitamins together and herbs and other supplements and stuff like that, quite often in equal proportions, which doesn't make any sense. And so my general rule is that, you know, if you pick up a label and you actually recognize most of the ingredients in there, it's a bad formula. And the way to think about this is that this type of medicine, building a formula like this, came out of very old cooking traditions, wise women traditions, and understanding of food. These are just extreme foods. It's all herbs are, is they're extreme foods. And we have plenty of extreme foods in our world. Spending the weekend at the carnival and stuff like that, and eating lots of crap food and stuff like that, you will feel different for days.
Yes, yeah.
No different. These are just extreme foods, are just being a little bit, or being applied in a little bit better way than the carnival. But they're extreme foods, and the way you do any type of food is that you build a recipe. You know, if you wanted to serve your friends hot dogs, you wouldn't invite friends over and put a bare hot dog on a plate. You'd add a bun and mustard and ketchup and potato chips or soda or whatever. You know, you'd build a meal, and pretty much all of our cooking traditions are that. You would never think to say, I'm going to make some grand meal. I need exactly 1 pound of each ingredient, and that's going to come out right.
Exactly. Sure.
And likewise, you would never invite all your friends over for a potluck and say, hey, bring your absolute favorite food to the potluck. And when they got here, take all of those foods, dump them into a large pot, stir it up, and expect something good to come out of it.
Yes.
The herbal supplement market is very good at doing those things. If they take popular herbs, put them all in, add vitamins and stuff like that, and other things that sound good, and then sell that as something. That's not medicine. That's just providing materials, and doesn't have a strategy or a way of doing things. It doesn't have a purpose. It's just ingredients.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to get beyond that. Yeah.
And it's responding, what you're talking about is responding to people's desire to be healthier.
Right.
But not having the full background necessary to figure out what really makes a difference and so forth.
And you can't go by what is standard for any one person. Everybody is different. We all function so differently. And what is needed for a person based on age, on their particular lifestyle, and all those things change a lot depending on where a person is in life. What are their strengths and weaknesses? And so a lot of what I do is counseling people and help them understand, here is your strengths, here's what's special about you, here's how you can really maximize that, and here's what's a problem for you or your weak spot. How do you minimize that?
Yes.
And you can do that through foods, you can do that through herbs, you can do that through lifestyle choices, you can do any number of little things, but it starts with, do we understand how this person is functioning? And traditional Chinese medicine, and some of the other traditional systems of medicine also do this, but really have a system where we can really understand the very complicated nature of the human body.
You have a
this is my clinic. I do a lot of walk-ins and miscellaneous, like I said. I try to be prepared for just about anything, so so I've got a lot at my disposal.
Yeah, you've got many shelves, and like I said, most of those items I do not recognize. Where do you source your herbs?
I use a particular company for most of things that I want. Every once in a while, the company that I use is very particular. The company is Mayway. They have very high standards, and as a result, because of those high standards, once in a while they don't have something, they'll tell me flat out, no, we haven't found sources that are to our standards, sorry.
Wonderfully reassuring for you as a practitioner.
It's very reassuring, but gets annoying at times, yes.
Right,
but
right.
but the point is that what you see there, those are all cooking ingredients, no different than your kitchen. It's just cooking ingredients that you're not familiar with, although some of them you would be. And as with all recipes, if you suddenly find yourself without something, you substitute.
Right.
Some things you can substitute for easily. Some things are a little bit more difficult.
Sure.
And that's the way I was trained, was that here's the classic formula, here's the classic recipe for these particular situations. And the raw herbs allow me to customize it to the patient, where say, yeah, that patient needs this particular formula or this particular recipe, but I'm going to tweak it a little bit and add a little bit more of this because I think they need that. Or I can't get that herb, sometimes due to legal reasons, sometimes due to scarcity or problems or other things. I'm going to substitute something else and adjust accordingly. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting things on that shelf. Some of them are very common. There's cinnamon up on that shelf. There's ginger on that shelf. There are some orange peels, mint, a couple other things. There's some mushrooms and stuff like that are not a whole lot different than some of the mushrooms that you have. But on the other hand, there's some things that are very exotic. There's a few bugs and some interesting little minerals and other things that are used as cooking ingredients for these formulas. Some of them are very tasty. There's some berries and stuff like that I have to keep myself from actually digging into my stock and having a few once in a while for a snack. And other things are downright toxic, where I have to be careful with them in the way of dosing, because anything that's strong enough to really affect somebody is also strong enough to hurt them, and some of those things are very strong. But I also have an understanding of how and why, and again, why not to use those things under certain circumstances, and what can be used for those things as medicine to really help a patient, sometimes with very severe conditions, and if you have a very severe condition, yeah, sometimes very severe, medicine is needed. So.
Sure. That kind of brings to mind for me, like cancer is kind of a weighty term, I guess.
Yeah.
Every once in a while there'll be, some ads that come out. This person has found the absolute cure to cancer. All you have to do is take this mix of whatever. What do you say to that?
Yeah, cancer is a tricky one, mostly because it scares people, and there's nothing like fear to get people to buy stuff.
Yes.
And again, the real trick is, what does the body need? Cancer is basically a misfunction within the body. Cancer cells are not something foreign. Cancer cells are your cells. They're just not doing what they're supposed to. And cancer is a many faceted thing. It's such an umbrella term that even doctors are having a hard time with that term, because it just scares people, and not all cancers are the same. There's a lot of different things. But unfortunately, we've gotten into this idea that, cancer is this thing, and so people want to, what is the cure for cancer? And there is no herbal cure for cancer. That said, there are a lot of things I do for patients who have cancer, but it's always a matter of, where is that patient at that time? What do they need based on how they want to treat the cancer? A lot of patients that I see are on chemotherapy. When I provide herbal help for those patients, I'm not providing something to treat the cancer. What I'm doing is helping them recover from the chemo quickly so that they can get the next round of chemo faster. I'm trying to help the doctors and trying to help that process. If somebody's using chemo, or in radiation or whatever, it's a matter of, how do we help support the body so that they can survive the treatment and get past this. Some people want to do more things where they're actually treating more specifically, and they're making specific choices as to which Western medical, biomedical things they want to use and which ones they don't, and that's fine. And again, back to, I'm going to work with what do I see in that patient? What does their body need at this time to try and help that? And cancer manifests in various types of symptoms and things that we recognize. And a lot of the formulas, the traditional herbal formulas that we use for cancer, I guess if you want to say that, are herbs and formulas that we use for a lot of other things. There's nothing special about them, it's just that they're being applied to the situation, much like a hammer can be applied to any number of different situations, from pounding a nail and building something to destroying something.
Sure,
It depends
sure.
on what you want to do. But the marketing people and a lot of people who are using various herbal supplements don't understand that differentiation of what does a patient need. And so I quite often see patients who are using various herbals that have been touted as anti-cancer, but they're using them, say, post-chemo when they're really weak, in which case those herbs are actually hurting them because they're depleting and hurting their system and helping to clear the system when what they need is to be strengthened up.
Right.
A classic marketing example, it was very big a few years ago, and it's still around. There's an herbal formula that came out of Native American traditions via some woman. The story is that it's called the Essiac formula. But the woman who had originally touted this, her story was she had, I believe, stomach cancer, and she found some native healer who said, oh, and here's an herbal formula, and that native healer took native plants, mixed up this herbal formula, and she recovered from the cancer, which does happen. People recover from cancer all the time, especially if you have a little help in that regard. But she started touting this as a cancer cure, and there's a lot of people who have said that this is a great cancer cure. The actual formula, if you really look at the formula, the actual formula is a very cold herbal formula designed to clear the bowels and the stomach system in a very strong, vigorous way. It's actually a very nice formula. It's not Chinese in origin, but I recognize the pieces and how that would work. But it would be a reasonable formula to give to somebody who has tremendous heat and burning in the gut, along with a stagnation or cancer in the gastrointestinal tract with pain. It would be very specific. Somebody who has just serious cancer-related pain in the stomach and in the whole gastrointestinal tract, basically.
Yes.
That formula makes sense. To then take that formula and apply it to brain cancer or skin cancer or anything else makes absolutely no sense. It really doesn't. It would just be a totally inappropriate tool for just about any other type of cancer, because it was specifically. And I suspect that the healer who gave that to her recognized what she needed and said, here's what you need. And it wasn't about the cancer, it was about what was she presenting.
Right.
So,
our time is running out, and I wanted to cover just one last topic, and that is qualifications.
Sure.
Because you have clearly very extensive training. And what would you recommend someone look for as they are trying to find someone who might help them?
The main thing is understand the difference between a salesperson and a medical professional. A medical professional is somebody who's actually looking at what do you need, what is your medical situation, and can explain why and why not to use things. There's a lot of different credentialing and stuff like that. I have, yes, very extensive credentialing, but I am considered a medical provider within the state of Wisconsin. I do a lot of work with the VA medical system. I do, occasionally some work with insurance and stuff like that, and people's medical systems. But my patients do consider me as a medical provider, and because they're looking to me for medical answers. If you took away my herbs and my needles and stuff like that, I'm still a medical provider. I can still help people, because it's not about the tools, it's about understanding what patients need. And I can make something up, and I do that all the time. prescribe, somebody can't be on herbs because their doctor says something or they're worried about various herbs. Fine, here's how you can adjust your diet, and we can do the same thing with foods or changing the lifestyle or whatever. But certifications, credentials, especially nationally board certified type things where there is a legitimate credentialing as opposed to there's a lot of people who are doing dry needling and acupuncture with little or no training. They have a certification from a company that is selling that on a weekend course. That's not medicine, that's just a quickie thing, that's a technical thing. And so, really ask a lot of questions and understand what is the medical provider and go to them for answers, not the tools. The tools are just, they're cool, there's a lot of neat herbs, there's a lot of neat stuff, but it's not about the tools, it's about, do you have somebody who knows how to use them and use them properly?
Wonderful. David, thank you for taking the time to come and speak with us today, and
thank you.
Wish you the very best. Sounds like you have just a wealth of information to share with your clients.
I do, yes, and a lot of people, I'm happy to help people, and that's the big thing, and it's fun being in a different system. My background is in biochemistry. I'm well aware of biomedical type things, but I understand that that can't always give the answer, and Chinese medicine is a different way of finding a little different answer. And that can be really helpful when Western medicine just doesn't have an answer because they just don't have the structure for it.
Exactly.
And so it's nice being part of a system that provides other options and helps people who can't be helped in other ways.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you for joining us. I hope to see you again on Pathways with Penny.